Welcome to another episode of Toot Your Own Horn Music Matters. Today I am here with Adam Brignone. Welcome.
Thanks for having me.
Oh, I'm so happy to have you. And I know our audience is going to eagerly want to know, how did you choose your wind instrument? Where did you start?
Well, it started a long time ago. When I was younger, my grandfather was a saxophone player, and nothing professional or anything like that. Just kind of a hobby saxophone player. Played his whole life, and so as I was kind of growing up in my younger years, I would hear him playing or hear recordings of him playing, and he was always kind of whispering in my ear that when it was time to pick an instrument, he would like me to play saxophone. So, naturally, when it came time to pick, that's what I picked. Neither of my parents were really musicians. My mom played cello in school for a little bit. My dad never played anything. But both of my parents saw value in music and thought that it was something important for my sister and I to be involved in. And, you know, fast forward many years, I'm now a music educator in the Buffalo, New York area, and my sister is as well. So we're both heavily involved in music just because my parents supported it.
Oh, one of my first pro gigs was playing something with Buffalo Phil.
Oh, okay. Very cool. Very cool.
It was very cool, for sure. So your parents were not involved in music, and yet they made it a priority for you, and your grandfather seemed to be really motivating to help you, and so you chose the saxophone.
Yep, I chose a saxophone, and my parents got me private lessons starting in third grade. Around here, students usually start school music in fourth grade or start an instrument in fourth grade. So they started me about a year early. So when I entered fourth grade, I was a little bit ahead of everybody else. But they just thought, it was time. I was ready. I had been asking to do it as something I really wanted to do. So I got a little bit of a jump start.
And so when you started, tell me what that was like and what happened next.
So I started taking private lessons with a well-known saxophone teacher in the Buffalo area, and he taught lessons out of his basement, but he had a huge lesson studio. And he put the instrument in my hands, taught me how to make a sound. He let me take it home while my parents secured a rental. So I brought home this instrument that I borrowed, and I just went around the house for a week making sounds, no fingers down or anything like that. And I thought it was the coolest thing. And then, my dad, a couple days later, my dad came home with my first rental instrument. And I was, pretty much hooked from there. And I just kept doing lessons. We worked out of a lesson book. And yeah, it's just something I really enjoy doing.
So, I'm just curious because a lot of times people, when they start an instrument, don't necessarily have a role model. And
Mhm.
you had a couple of role models, but what was it that made you so sticky right away? Because it's sort of like you got talked into it, kind of.
I guess right away, my grandfather had stopped playing prior to me playing because he had carotid artery surgery on his neck, and he never felt comfortable playing again, whether or not he could have or not. So he was constantly asking me, "How's it going? Are you doing this? Are you doing that?" And then my first private teacher was just very motivating guy. He, sometimes positively, sometimes negatively. He was more of an old school teacher. But I think that taught me at a young age to have tough skin and to work hard because I didn't want to let him down, or I didn't want to, you know, my parents to think they were wasting their money or anything like that. Because I knew it was, at the time it was a lot of money to give a kid private lessons. So I recognized that my parents were working hard to be able to do this for me, and most of my friends at school were not taking private lessons. So it was that motivated me, but for some reason, I just thought it was fun. And the more we went through the lesson book and I got to play little tunes that I recognized, your Hot Cross Buns and Mary Had a Little Lamb, Twinkle Twinkle, as you started to hit those classics, it was very motivating because it was fun to do.
Yeah, for sure. So then what happened?
So after that, so during elementary school, I played all through elementary school. Went to middle school, which is around the time I started to get into jazz, which I thought was the coolest thing ever. I started playing in the jazz band in fifth grade. And then as I went into middle school, I picked up a tenor sax because that's what they, had an opening for in the middle school jazz band. And we were lucky to have our jazz band meet during the day in middle school. It wasn't a before school thing. It was an actual class that met at the end of the school day. So anybody who wanted to be in it could be in it. There were no transportation, concerns or anything like that. And I started to get really into jazz. My parents bought me a real book which was very cool. So I had, hundreds of jazz tunes at my disposal, and my grandfather had some cassette tapes and CDs later on of jazz tunes. So I was starting to hear things that I liked, and I would find them in the real book and play along. So I'd say in middle school, what really hooked me was the jazz aspect of everything.
Yeah. Did you have a lot of friends in band?
I did, yeah. When I was in elementary and middle, most of my friends were in band, but once we start talking about high school, that's where it really took off in terms of lifelong friends and things like that.
Yeah. So you went on into high school, and what happened in high school?
So I went into high school, and around the end of middle school, I would say I was a pretty decent musician. I wasn't thinking about it as a career. I was just thinking about it kind of as a hobby. Other things started to get my interest. I was really into sports and things like that. So I was kind of maybe not practicing much as I should, and wasn't really as into it as much as I've been in my younger years. And then I got to high school, and that completely changed. I had a band director who was one of the most motivating educators I've ever seen in my life in any subject in any school. So he pointed me sort of in the right direction towards a group of friends who were a little bit older than me, but were incredible players. And I wanted to be just like them. I wanted to play in the saxophone quartet with them. I wanted to go on gigs with them. I wanted to do everything they were doing. So I worked really hard when I got to high school, trying to fit in with that band group. And I can say I still talk to all of these people now. Some of them were in my wedding. One of my best friends, the best man at my wedding, we still see each other regularly. We went to college together. So I'd say the social aspect in high school became really the forefront of the whole, music scene. And eventually, when it was time to start talking about a career, I really couldn't see myself doing anything else. I didn't want to give it up. I didn't want to do it any less. I wanted to do more, and that's sort of how I landed on going into music.
Yeah. So tell me about that high school band director. What made him such a phenomenal educator, and how did he hook you up with saxophone quartets?
First of all, the way he taught was, people would say maybe a little unorthodox, but to me, he was the kind of guy that was jumping around the room and walking on the backs of our chairs in band, so we sat up straight, and using funny jokes and things that made us laugh, and just like his personality was just infectious. Everybody loved him, and everybody wanted to learn from him and be in his class. It's just one of those people that during the school day, everybody hung out in the band room. Everybody in band lived in the band room. Sometimes maybe when they shouldn't, kids not going to class because they wanted to be in the band room. So he just fostered this environment of belonging and family, and we all just, we just wanted to be there. And the students that he sort of directed me towards were, I think when I was a freshman, they were juniors, so they were kind of the leaders of the program already. They were, going to the all county bands and the all state and all those things, talking about going into music as a career, and just sort of putting me around them, without really much work, just drove me to want to be them, I guess you could say.
And compared to other subjects, now that you're a band director, and I want to hear about your college, but would you say that what would you say about band in terms of like the kind of value base that it builds? Like, how is it different than other classes?
Well, for me, and I see this as a teacher too with students, for me, band was sort of like a release. You go to these other classes and there's a lot of stress, and you have to study and you have to do work, and it's, you want to make sure you're getting the best grades and things. And when you go to band, there's, at least for me, there was no stress. It was like, okay, I can relax now. I can enjoy myself. I can have fun. It was something that I just felt like, I needed to be a part of to keep sane sometimes, I guess you could say. So I lived in the band room all the time because it was an important part of my sort of my release and my relaxing when I was in school.
Hmm. Did in your school, did they run sectionals, and was it competitive, or was it mostly built around community more so than competitiveness?
I think it was a little bit of both. I think the community and social aspect was huge, but there was also a little competitive aspect to it. You know, we did seating auditions, and you wanted to be a section leader. We had a top band and a second band. You wanted to get the lead alto part in jazz band or the lead tenor part in jazz band. So there was that competitive thing, but I also think it depended on what kind of music student you were. And that was one of the things that was really cool about this high school program was that if you were somebody that maybe music wasn't your life and you weren't taking it seriously and you just wanted to be sort of like a social band member, there was a place for you. And if you wanted to be somebody who was really into it and competitive and wanted to be section leader, there was also a place for you. So it kind of welcomed everybody, no matter your interest or ability level.
So you said you were interested in sports, and what other subject matters were you really interested in high school?
I was really into history. I liked all of my social studies classes through high school, and that's sort of lined up with music a little bit because I started to really get interested in the music history aspect and also like the history of instruments. I'm really into saxophones, vintage instruments, where they came from, where they were manufactured, who made them, who designed them, things like that. So that interest in history has stayed and it has kind of, fallen into the music realm as well for me.
So when did you make the decision to be a music major, and where did you go to college?
I decided around probably my sophomore year. I said, I think this is it. Because at that time, my sister was a senior and she was going into music. So my parents, when we loaded up the car to visit schools, colleges, I came along. And so I started looking at colleges 2 years before anybody else, any of my friends. And so I started to see these schools and I started to think, maybe this is something I could do too. I would be interested in this school, or I would like to do this or that. And so I pretty much decided my sophomore year and never really looked back.
Wow. What you didn't say anything about your sister. I missed the sister part. So what does your sister do?
Well, she's a vocalist. She does play piano, but she's a vocalist. So she taught elementary and middle school general music first. Then she did high school for about 4 or 5 years, and then she went back in another district to elementary choir and general music.
Oh wow. Did you guys do stuff together? Did she sing and did you play? And like how
Yeah, when I was in school, like in high school for a couple years in jazz band, she played piano in jazz band and she also would sing. So there were some instances where we played together. Also school musicals, I would play in the pit and she'd be on stage. So we had quite a few things we were together on. We also ran kind of in a similar circle of friends, at least while she was in school and I was in school at the same
Oh,
time.
that's really nice. That's
Yeah.
the nice story. I missed that part. That's really cool. And so your
Yeah.
had two kids. They weren't musical and had two kids that turned out to be very musical.
Yeah, it was all about the support. That's all. They pushed us to take lessons. They pushed us to practice. They made sure that when we were ready, at least for me, I mean, my sister didn't really need instruments or anything, but for me, when it was time to, purchase an instrument, they made sure I had one. When it was time to step up to something professional, they made sure that they, found a way for me to, I saved some of my own money, but they also would chip in, or I took out, we called it a loan from the bank of mom and dad. So they would help me, finance those instruments so I would pay them back. So they made sure we were in the good headspace to be successful.
Honestly, I have seen so many kids save part of their money with their families to buy instruments, and I always think it's a good thing, even if it's just a little tiny bit.
Yep.
Just make sure that they have skin in the game.
Yeah, for sure. My first alto that I owned, my grandfather bought me, so he purchased that for me. So I didn't have any pay in that. But when I got into high school and I started to want more advanced instruments, my tenor sax I purchased with all my own money that I earned on my Buffalo newspaper route. And then my alto, because I had spent so much on my tenor, I wanted an alto immediately, of course. My parents got it for me for Christmas as a surprise and said, we're going to put this much toward it and you pay us back the rest. And that's what we did.
Oh, that's awesome. That's really
Yeah.
cool. So where did you wind up going to school for music?
So I went to college at Capital University in Columbus, Ohio. So even though I'm from Buffalo, I went out of state. I found Capital through their honor band program. So my band director, who I've talked about quite a bit, every year he would enter students to be selected for this honor band that Capital did. where high school students from all over the area, multiple states would come. They would have a guest conductor. You would get to stay in the dorms. You would do master classes with their faculty, and it was more of a recruiting event for them. And with me, it definitely worked because when it was time to pick a school, and I auditioned at 5 or 6 places. I kept coming back to Capitol because I was the most comfortable there because I had gone there for 2 years for this honor band event. I knew where the dining hall was. I knew, I already knew some people there. I knew who my professor was going to be. I'd already had 2 lessons with him. Like it was just a natural fit.
That's great. And so what was your major?
I majored in music education right from the beginning and stuck with it all the way through.
And were you playing a lot, or were you becoming a teacher and playing less, or what were you doing? Like,
I definitely was playing a lot. I mean, Capital, I don't know what many other schools are doing now, but Capital really put an emphasis on playing. When you were a music ed major, you had to be, as part of your degree program, you had to be in what they called a major ensemble. So, one of the concert bands or the orchestra or one of the big bands or something like that. You had to be in a major. And then you could join a multitude, as many as you wanted, of smaller groups, combos, quartets, things like that. And one of the nice things that they did was, when we go to college, we all have a cap on how many hours we can take, right? I think it was 18 was the cap. Nobody took more than 18. Well, at Capitol, if you wanted to join additional music ensembles and you were already at your cap of 18, they would let you join that for free. So I could take 19 and a half credit hours if I wanted to add a couple groups and I didn't have to pay for it. So, which was because your tuition covered 18 hours. And if you went above that, technically you were probably supposed to pay more tuition, but they would let you do that, which was another reason why I chose to go there.
oh, that's cool. And did you learn multiple instruments in your ed degree?
Yeah, I took methods classes over the sophomore, junior, and senior year. I learned, percussion, strings, woodwinds, brass. So it gave me a really nice baseline, but I will say I've become pretty proficient on most of the woodwind instruments because I'm a saxophone player. And that learning mainly took place in my first few years of teaching when I, was up against it and basically had to stay one page ahead of the kids. My first year of teaching. So I would say that I learned a good basis in school, but if you're going to become a proficient secondary player, it comes when you're working, at least for me.
When you have to teach someone else how to do it.
Exactly. And you don't want to look like you don't know what you're talking about.
So what's it like to be a band director? Tell us about your job.
It's great. This is going to be my 15th year. So bet it goes really fast. It seems like just yesterday I graduated and started teaching. I started out my first 7 years at a charter school in Buffalo, and we had a really nice band program there that was well supported, grades 4 through 12. So at first I taught grades 4 through 8, and there was a high school band director. And then the school expanded. We bought a new building and split up our middle school and elementary, and I chose to go to the middle school. So the next 3 years, or no, it was 3 years the first time, then 4 years at the middle school. I taught 6 through 8 band. And then after my 7th year, it was, for a multitude of reasons, it was time to find something else. And I went to a rural district for the next 4 years, which is where I cut my teeth during COVID. So that was my COVID time. So I spent a good amount of my time in that building teaching online, which was tough for everybody, but I learned a lot about technology during that time. And then this is my 4th year in my current school, and I'm in a suburban district, really big district with a ton of support. I have great administrators, great colleagues, great students, great families, really supportive families. And this, assuming all goes well, this will be my final stop.
Awesome. So, I think when I asked if you would participate in this podcast that I've been talking about the fact that our sector of the industry is actually at a 50-year low with 3 years of employment. How does that reflect or not in Buffalo?
I see it in our, our music department numbers, not just band, but across choir, orchestra, everywhere, that less students are participating. Now, one thing that I am excited about is, we see, I call this sort of like the COVID kind of upside down bell curve, where the students who started in music prior to COVID are up here. The kids who started during COVID are at the bottom. It's very low numbers. And now we're starting to see kind of a trend upwards again. So I think right now, our kids that are going into high school, ninth graders, were the kids who started their instruments on the computer in fourth grade. And I don't think many of them survived that. You know, we lost a lot of kids there because, as we know, it's really tough to learn an instrument over the internet. Without a teacher there, you know, showing you technique, demonstrating, nope, move your finger here, move your finger there, do this with your embouchure. So I am starting to see in our numbers, I'm starting to see an increase again with our students who started music after we were done with the COVID thing. So I am seeing a little bit of light at the end of the tunnel, but during COVID, there was a huge dip, and we're gonna, you know, be dealing with the effects of that for years. It's not going to go away fast. It's going to go until those COVID kids have graduated.
Well, and also we lost a lot of music stores and we
Mhm.
lost a lot of industry in that period of time. A lot of repair technicians retired. A lot of things happened during that period of time that also have diminished because industry, that's a part of industry also
Right.
of.
Right. If there are no consumers, there's no store, there's no, you know, worker, there's nothing like that.
Yeah. How do you help your parents understand the value of investing in music?
Well, I think the first and foremost, communication. I think being sort of not being in their face, but making sure they're aware of everything we're doing all the time. You know, we send out a newsletter every month or two. We have performances going on constantly. I also direct a marching band in my school, and we invite them to, like, when we're finishing up band camp, we invite them to come in, and yeah, we're not the best yet. We're just learning what we're doing, but we invite them to come in. This is what we've learned this week. Look at how much we've done this week. And we have marching band shows every week. We always are asking for volunteers. We're always, you know, encouraging parents to come to our away shows. We do a home show at our field that we invite. So I think just showing them what you do, and having them see success and having their kids be successful is the most valuable recruiting tool for families and students.
And how did the decline affect budgets for your purchasing and for your district in general for music?
Well, so the district I'm in now, I'm not too sure if there was anything going on because I wasn't there when it happened. I know when I arrived in my current district, our budgets are very strong. Our administrative support is very strong. So I really have no complaints there currently. In my other school, I would say I didn't see too much of a change from what we had. There were opportunities to purchase things with what they called COVID relief money. I don't know if that was going on in other states, but schools receive COVID relief money here. And, you know, we, like, when I started in my previous school, I didn't have a marimba. And I always was like, we need a marimba. As a high school band, you got to have a marimba. You got to have a set of chimes. And we got the COVID relief money. They told me I could buy a marimba and I could buy a set of, you know, tubular chimes, which I never had. So, I saw a little uptick in that just because of that COVID relief, but I didn't see too much of a change, I would say.
Mhm. Buffalo's really an interesting community. At least when I played in Klein Hall, it's surrounded by a fairly poor population. It's Klein Hall's in a weird demo.
Yeah, it's in the city of Buffalo, sort of near the Peace Bridge, which is your main bridge to Canada. So yeah, it's been there a very long time. You know, it's been there. Kleinhans has been there for, you know, I would say 75 years, probably more than that. It's probably like the 30s or 20s.
Yeah, and like any city, Buffalo has a very mixed population. Are
Mhm.
you do you have a lot of kids that barely can afford to participate in band, or is it kind of mixed, or is it only up?
In my current district, we don't see too much of that. Occasionally, maybe. In the first school I worked at, which was a charter school, which is located right in the city of Buffalo, we definitely saw that. And that charter school, you know, saw a value in music, and they were very, very supportive of what we were doing. And I can't say I ever turned a kid away because they couldn't afford it, because the school would say, if a kid can't afford it, we'll provide it. So I would go to my principal and say, hey, you know, student XYZ says they can't afford, their parents said they can't do it, what can we do? And then, you know, they would say, all right, let's get an instrument, or do you have a school instrument you can give them? Don't charge a rental fee. So, you know, sometimes charter schools get a bit of a bad rap around the country, but at least the ones around here, the one I worked at, was not the case. I think the kids got a great education and everybody cared, and they really supported the music program there. Made sure that cost wasn't a reason a kid couldn't participate.
Do you have any advice for any educator listening who may be struggling with either getting a budget for repair or a budget for supplies, or what kind of support that they can provide to their administration to try to increase and improve their situations?
Right. I mean, that's a really tough one, and I've been there in certain places where I didn't have a huge budget, or I didn't have a budget at all. I've worked, in that environment as well. And I think being kind of a squeaky wheel to a point, constantly trying to show why we need this, like, hey, we ordered this music, it has this part in it, we can't play it because we don't have the instrument. And I mean, I went so far as, and I'm not sure this is the right answer if you're trying to get budgeting, but I would beg, borrow, from friends. I would go to, a friend's school and borrow music from their library. I borrowed a vibraphone and a set of chimes from my old high school band director. Just said, hey, do you have an, they had a school, they downsized and they had a school closed, so they had a lot of extra instruments. I was like, can I borrow these until you decide what you're doing with them? So I've done that, and, you do what you got to do. If it means you got to borrow, then you got to borrow. And I always am a firm believer in returning the favor, because you never know when you're going to be that person that needs it. So, for example, where I am now, we're very well supported. We have healthy budgets. We have a lot of good supplies. And there was another band director who helped me a lot when maybe I wasn't that fortunate. And now, he came to me last year, was like, hey, do you have any marching drums? And I remember 5 years ago, he let me borrow all this stuff. And now he said, I've got an entire set of marching drums that I'm not using. Please take them. Like, it's important to help your friends too, because you never know when you're going to be in that boat yourself. So if somebody asks me for something and I can do it, I'll do it, because I know it was me at some point. It might be me again.
And where did your interest come in taking repair or learning more about repair? And how does that fit into what you're doing?
Yeah, so there's a few different reasons I wanted to get into repair. Number one, as you mentioned before, there's definitely a shortage of repair technicians in our area, and I've heard that it's going on everywhere. And so, I would like to be able to perform my own repairs on my own instruments. That's one of the reasons. Is it's hard to find somebody to do work sometimes, or if you find somebody, they're way backed up. You have to wait weeks, months, whatever. So that's one of the reasons. Another reason is, I try to fix instruments for my students because, like I said, you have to, give weeks or months for something to get back. And I hate seeing a kid without an instrument in their hand for that long for something, so simple that I feel like if I just knew what I was doing, I could fix this in 5 minutes. So I wanted to help my students, maybe help our repair budget go a little farther at school with little things that I could handle, keep instruments in my kids' hands. And then the third reason is, like I mentioned, I'm really into history, very into like vintage saxophones, and I would like to get into, purchasing, vintage instruments that maybe need some love and being able to fix them myself and things like that. So that's probably the third reason I got into it.
Yeah, that's cool. And have your students gotten to experience you being able to help them on the spot or do some things to make their lives easier?
Yeah, here or there. I can do some little things now. I just finished your basics course this summer, and I'm looking forward to doing the next doing level 1 after marching band is over. But I've always been somebody who likes to sort of tinker, and I've always kind of played around on my own instruments to an extent. And if I think I can fix something for a student, I'll definitely do it.
Yeah. The thing that has made me really excited about this program for people that are in band directing in
Right.
schools that are working is the stories that we keep hearing, and I can't wait to hear yours, because the kids really light up when they realize, oh, this isn't me. Because they don't know.
Right.
In our clarinet shop, we wind up getting in people who are in their masters or sometimes getting their doctorates, and they know so very little about the way that their clarinet performs that they actually think they need to buy a new one when they
Right.
literally never serviced it, or
Mhm.
very strange. Like
One of the biggest detractors for a student when they're learning, at least I found at the elementary level, is if they're not able to achieve success. Like, let's say there are kids that don't practice, and they falls by the wayside because they're not putting the work in. That happens. But a lot of times, maybe a student has a sub quality instrument, or we call them, like the ones you get on Amazon. We call them instrument shaped objects. Like, a kid has something like that, or a kid has an instrument that's not working correctly and they can't achieve success, that drives them away. Like, well, I stink at this. I don't want to do it. And a lot of times it's not even their fault. It's like, well, if we got this leak fixed, you'd probably be doing a lot better. So I think that's important too for the recruitment aspect you were talking about. Having quality instruments that function properly in students' hands is a big deal.
And allowing, and like my vision is allowing more teachers to fix them on the fly for little things so that they can start to understand the relevance because
Right.
you just don't get if you take the instrument away from them, they forget what the problem was, they get it back, they're not sure, they don't remember. And repair has so much instant gratification when it's somebody is in capable hands. It's just it's like, oh my God, this is so much better. And then they start
And
more things.
90% of the instrument issues we see that we send instruments in for repair are things that, if you're educated, can be done in less than a half an hour.
Exactly.
Sometimes less than 2 minutes. Just I've seen teachers send, like a saxophone in for repair because the spring is off. It's like, that's literally just pulling it back. That's all you got to do. Why didn't you just ask me? But that happens. That happens. You got a trumpet player. Maybe they don't understand how the springs work on a woodwind instrument. Just like I don't understand certain things about brass instruments. I'm lucky in my position that I have a coworker who's a brass player. The other high school band director is a brass player. So when I have a brass, issue, I'm like, hey, take it to him. Or he has a woodwind, go find Mr. Brignone. He'll fix it. So we're lucky, but some people don't have that.
And that kind of community really helps because any of those marginal kids, and I'm sure you realize this, but just for people listening, when you have these skills, even though, you're pulling out the closet, we call it closet instruments, or, it came from pawn shop or whatever,
Right.
and you're trying to help that kid make progress. Not only do they become more sticky because they realize that their instrument can be adjusted, but they become closer to the person who just fixed it because they realize that person's involved in their development and paying attention. And
Right.
that they're not paying attention when they sit down and help them, but that's a different level of paying attention because now it's more integrated into their actual experience of playing.
Right. Right. Yeah, it's important, and just I also like to kind of I'm interested in like the music instrument market. I spend a lot of time just looking at things on Reverb or eBay, trying to understand where prices are, so when parents come to me and say, "Hey, we'd like to buy an instrument," I'm not just saying, "I don't know, good luck, go look on the internet." I can say, "Oh, we've got this great local store here. They're having a sale. These are great deals. This is way under market value," or "I would avoid this because it's too expensive." It's good to be educated in that aspect too. And I always try to push kids to purchase local, from music stores, because, I know that if you have an issue, you can take it back and say, "I'm having trouble with this. Can you please help me?" And they're going to be there. It's not going to be somebody writing an email or somebody in a different country or whatever, and you're never going to get an answer. So I always push local if I can.
That's the best way. I mean, yeah, the stronger the local community is, the stronger the music programs are, in my opinion.
Right.
It is the best thing because people then have lots of relationships they're building around their interest and hobby.
Right. Exactly.
For sure. If someone was listening to this and just loved your story, what would you tell them to decide to play a wind instrument right now?
I would tell them to do it. Obviously, I think it's a great thing. I always push with kids the social and belonging aspect of being in band. I think it's extremely important. I think kids now more than ever are very uncomfortable in social situations. Coming out of COVID, a lot of them spent their formative years at home, not interacting with their peers, not interacting with adults. So a lot of them are worried about new social situations. Going from middle school to high school or elementary to middle school. That is a really scary thing, more than it ever was before. And we always tell kids, band is your family. When you're in middle school, you come to the band room, you already know who's there. You already know some of the kids. If, we have eighth graders in marching band. When they come to the high school, they're sitting with seniors at lunch. Like they're not looking to make, new friends at lunch because they don't know anybody. They know where the band room is. They're not going to get lost. They know who I am. They know who the other director is. So I think it's really important for them to have a place of belonging, and that's what music can offer. And I think we also push that music is a lifelong skill. It's not just a thing you do in school. A lot of adults use music as a release, like I talked about, because when you get into the working world, whether or not you're in music or not, you get into the working world, life is stressful. You get married, you have kids, you have responsibilities. Some adults need something to sit down and do for a half hour that they don't have to worry about or they don't have to stress about. So, we always encourage kids, if you're not going to go into music, that's fine. But join a community band. We have a community band where I work every summer, and a lot of people come back and do that. Even people that didn't go to school where we are, they just want a place to play. So in addition to that community, we push it after school. Like, this is a lifelong thing that you can lean back on when you need to.
It's also an emotional release, like
Mhm.
it's a way to get your feelings out without having to say a word.
Right.
'Cause you can blow them out, right? Like,
Right.
as you have to
Exactly.
living, right? Um,
Exactly.
and if there's an adult that's in your neck of the woods saying, who do I call? I mean, should they call a middle school band director? Should they call a high school? Who should they call if they're like, I didn't do this as a kid or I quit and I want to get started? Who would you recommend for somebody to make a cold call to that might actually help them?
Well, I mean, a lot of times I recommend, we have a lot of music stores that offer lesson programs, great lesson programs. But we also, like in my district, we have like a community education department that offers all sorts of things, not just music. They do, home repair classes or knitting classes or things like that. And we do have some music things that are offered, like that community band. So I encourage people to check out the community ed programs in their districts. But also, if you're interested in starting, you just ask somebody for a reputable music store. And if they don't offer lessons, then they'll probably point you in the direction of somebody who does. And I think the local, like you said, the local community is really the way to go.
Yeah, and the key is don't go rent, if you go to that local store and they say that they are an affiliate for some rental company that's far away, go find somebody you can rent
Yeah.
right there.
Yeah.
And then really do, if you can't find that, then call the local high school or middle school and say, what can I do?
Mhm.
Because they might have something or know somebody selling something that's affordable or but definitely keep it local. Like if you're trying to get started, because it's very, I think, more isolating experience if you're mailing things and you don't really know, like it's better to
Right.
stay local.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree 100%.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Adam, for your time. I
Absolutely.
really, really appreciate this. And I hope you join us for level one. You're such a
Okay.
fighter. I can tell you're so committed. And so I really
Yep.
hope you'll keep going.
I'm really excited to do level one. I've already been talking with my rep about when that's going to be offered. I do, I have marching band starting up. We've been going most of the summer. We have band camp next week, and my free time pretty much goes away for the next 2 months. But once we hit, November, I'm going to be excited to find out when I'm going to be.
We can
Yeah, January.
January. We'll start in January for sure. We'll have another Victor
Perfect.
Flynn class in January.
Perfect. Yeah, I'm really excited to do that. I have my grandfather, the one who inspired me when he passed away. He left me his saxophone, which is a 1941 Martin. And it was purchased, his mother purchased it. They were, immigrants from Poland. They didn't have any money. And his mother purchased it by making like 50 cent or dollar payments every week. She would ride the streetcar down to the Wurlitzer factory. I'm sure you've heard of like Wurlitzer organs. Well, they also sold band instruments back then. And there was a factory here, and she would ride the streetcar to make payments until she could have it. So I have that instrument. One of the things I really want to do is I want to be the one to overhaul it.
That's really, really sweet. Well, we are hiring a woman to work very part-time by the name of Patricia Hinckley, who's in our flute classes. She's doing
Okay.
part 1 and 2. She's got a coaching background, and you might get an email or call from her because we're going through all of our past students to talk about what they're learning, what they're building. So you should get an email from her. That's
Sure.
what that is.
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome.
Let's do it.
Thank you so much. I'll look for your photograph. Have a great day.
All right. Thanks. You too. Bye bye.
Bye.